Thank you. Let's go bring this meeting of Templeton Community Services District Board of Directors to order. Today is April 15th, Tuesday, April 15th at 4:30. This is a special meeting, so roll call, please.
Director Svardanish.
Here.
Logan.
Here.
Mortensen.
Here.
Peterson.
Here.
And Tyrone.
Here.
Great, thank you. Everyone's here. We have a closed session item. First, I want to see if there are any public comment on the closed session item. No, we are good. Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll adjourn to the closed. All right, let's go ahead. Bring to order our special meeting, Templeton Community Services District Board of Directors special meeting. It's 5:10 and report out of close. We had a closed session and report out of closed session. There's nothing reportable action that was done out of during our closed session. Right. Roll call, please.
Director Svardanish.
Here.
Logan.
Here.
Mortensen.
Here.
Peterson.
Here.
And Tyrone.
Here.
Okay, public comment. Public comment. Members of public may address the board on any items of interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board, but not on the agenda today. Any public members out there that want to make any comments? No? Okay. We'll go ahead and move on to our business strategic planning workshop. And this is to discuss the strategic plan for 2025 to 2028. And the portion of the plan that we will be discussing is the administrative and finance items, vision statements, and any additional other items that may need to be incorporated into the strategic, with the possibility of ad hoc committee being appointed by the board president to finalize the strategic plan. Okay, all right. General Manager.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at this. I guess I'll first by saying the service area is labeled at admin and finance. But there are some items in here that just didn't fit anywhere else, so they were placed here. It doesn't necessarily mean they're strictly administrative or administration or finance related items. We took a stab at drafting these based on some of the input we received when we started the review of the general plan back in December, as well as some items that have just occurred, had been noted over the ensuing months. And then again, some of these things are just stuff that we wanted to present. So I'll start with again, these don't have to be in this order, but it's the way that we're drafted, this way I drafted them. So item number one really it addresses two issues. They're a little bit distinct from one another. And the district's done a good job, particularly over the last, say, 6 or 7 years about implementing policies to minimize our long-term liabilities and preserve our long-term health. And these really, when I say long-term, very long-term issues, 20, 30, 40, 50, or year kind of issues. When it comes to OPEB or other post-employment benefit issues, up until about 15 years ago, these things were sort of just not even booked on the district's, on anybody's balance sheet. There were some changes with the way government accounting worked, and we all, not just Templeton CSD, all municipalities, special districts had to begin booking these long-term liabilities. And this district in particular had what I'll label retiree health benefits, employees who retired from the district received and many do receive employer paid health insurance after retirement. It wasn't particularly uncommon, but not every employer offered that. In 2014, the district took some steps to reduce the growth of that liability, implemented some new policies. So employees that came to the district after May of 2014 have a much reduced benefit. We're still part of PERS health insurance. And there's this, in PERS health insurance, there's a monthly, it's known as the PEMCA minimum, that if our employees who retire remain on PERS health insurance, the district covers, I think right now it's $159 a month. It goes up a few bucks every year. But the thought is that far fewer employees would remain on that plan because it's not fully funded. It's only maybe, 20% funded if they're employee only, and less if it's maybe 10% if it's two parties. We did implement, policies, to become what we'll call fully funded, what I'll label fully funded, and we started out, making small contributions. And then realized there was an opportunity to kind of like make a lump sum contribution out of all the funds to become quote unquote fully funded, and we think we were there like 4 or 5 years ago. But there's a lot of volatility in the trust fund, and there's a lot of volatility with regards to what those costs are likely gonna be based on certain assumptions that actuaries use, how long people live, how much health insurance costs rise, et cetera. And what that created is, although, for a period of time, we thought we were fully funded, 100% funded. The last couple of years, the actuaries have determined that, we're maybe like at 85%, I can't remember what our last number was. Yeah, percent funded. So there's some volatility there. And I wouldn't recommend we overreact to any of those single year changes, because when you put money into that trust, it's pretty much untouchable until the trust is ready to be closed out, and so we don't want to lock up our assets there unnecessarily. So I included this 1A as a way of, I'd like to do some research, see how other agencies are dealing with this volatility, and develop some policy language that helps guide when we would be making future contributions. Probably after 2 or 3 years of below 100%, or maybe even below 90%, to get us to above 90%. So this concept of being fully funded it's not gonna like be static at 100% all the time. It's gonna kind of go up and down, and we just need, I think, some policies that better reflect that. And this is important for the district's long-term financial health. If the policies are adopted in the big picture, then it'll help make those decisions about when to make contributions into the OPEB fund a little easier, hopefully a little bit more predictable. Our current policy was set up to get us there, but once we got there, it kind of no longer works. So that's item 1A. It's a long-term matter. This was of the two I listed here, a little bit higher priority and a little easier to tackle. So that's why I put a date of next June for consideration of adoption. So again, this would be a revision to the strategic financial policies to address this.
And if I
Better
understand
address the
you
OPEB.
correctly then too, is what you're saying with 1A is that because there was a change in the policy of offering these OPEB benefits, that eventually it will grandfather its way out.
Yeah, I'm not sure it'll ever get to 0. It'll get to a much smaller number relative to our employee population, because good, bad, or different, these retirees will eventually actuarially expire.
Yeah.
So yes, in the very long term, but we still have employees here that are eligible for this benefit. Some are still in their 40s. So I mean, we're talking about 40 or 50 years from now, probably, before you get to that point where you don't have employees.
Kind of like a mortgage.
Yeah, it's a very long-term issue. So I think it's important and worth consideration to address that. Item B is similar in that the district, what we participate in, California Public Employment Retirement System, CalPERS, very common. Most agencies are part of CalPERS, or they have their own system that works very similarly. Even though we're a very small district, we actually have 6 unique retirement plans. 3 for miscellaneous, 3 for public safety, so firefighters. And the plan you're in, it relates to when you joined the district and or when you joined CalPERS or a reciprocal program. So for example, there's 3 employees right here. We're each in a different plan because of those circumstances. PEPRA, exactly. PEPRA, tier 2, tier 1. And there's 2 issues here. over the years, the districts, this, what I'll call tier one plans, the district had very generous retirement benefits prior to 2012. Kind of top of the line, retirement benefits, that were available to employees who were here prior to those dates. And, you know, I think by the early 2000s, these all became available to public agencies in the early 2000s during that dot-com boom, and others were saying, okay, hey, these plans are super funded. There's so much growth in the stock market. The investments are doing better than they need to do. You can enhance benefits without even increasing your costs or contributions. Well, that was just a farce. It just didn't exist. But a lot of people took the bait, this agency being one of them, enhance those benefits. They're absolutely unsustainable. The costs skyrocketed, quite frankly, for those tier one plans. The district took steps in 2012 to create a second tier, still very competitive benefits. And then, of course, January 1 to 2013, a new formula is now only available sort of statewide. PEPRA, there was a pension reform that was done statewide, and it kind of reset the playing field. So for our tier two and our PEPRA plans, our unfunded accrued liability are fairly modest figures. That had this tier one issue not existed, we could just deal with either pay them down annually or whatever. They're pretty modest figures. For the tier one plan, which most of those employees are now retired, I think we have 3 employees left that are still part of tier one. They're volatile. We've paid them off fully twice in the last 12 years, in 2013 and again in 2022, paid the UAL down, and they keep coming back. And essentially the forecasted cost of those benefits exceed the amount of money that the district had contributed historically, with a bunch of other assumptions that are mixed in there. And it creates this unfunded accrued liability. 2 issues there. One is just being able to continue to pay it down. And then 2, the way we've paid it down in the past is we've divided up the costs. I'll just pick on tier one for a second. Amongst the employees that remain in tier one, and we've allocated that, let's say the unfunded liability was $100,000 in a given year. We've spread that across the employees that remained in that tier one and paid for it out of those funds. But that's an expiring strategy. As our employees retire out, we're likely to still have unfunded accrued liability, but no more employees to assign those costs to, because they'll all be retired. So we need a new accounting system or a way of appropriating those expenses for tier one in particular, and then just to address this UAL in general. So those are things that I think are important to adjust in our strategic financial policy. Come up with a plan that dictates when you're going to make contributions. If you do nothing, you could do nothing. The PERS assumes you're never going to deal with this, and they just send you a bill each year. But what you're essentially doing is, by doing nothing, you're borrowing money at 7.5%. It's very expensive. Well, maybe not in today's rate environment, but it's historically expensive money because they haven't been able to get a return on that investment. So they're asking us to make it up. And so the do nothing approach is not advisable, because we're essentially borrowing money at a fairly high interest rate, and so we're better off trying to keep that UAL paid down. So that's items 1 and A and B. It's really some research on the staff's end. We could present draft policies to probably the committee, and then it could come before the board for consideration. And then once it's adopted, it'd be folded into the budget process for the following year, for both of those items. Makes sense? Okay, these are important. I think they're worthy of our time.
So on item A, are we post-retirement, is that over on MHCA that you're doing for contributions within that, or is that a separate amount?
It's above and beyond. It actually matches what the employees who were hired during that period received as employees. So our resolution or commitment, we changed the way it works a little bit back in 2014, but the dollars and cents remain the same. And what it essentially ties to is the PERS platinum rate for up to 2 parties.
But that's like Santa Barbara.
So it ends up being, like right now, I wanna say about $2,300 a month for a two-party, like if you have, if an employee retired and they're staying, and they remain married and they're both alive, that becomes the
Even
maximum.
like the PEM rate's 157 right now, that's like the minimum.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
because that's what applies to folks after 2014, so it's a much, it's like I said, a much more manageable figure.
And then for the second one, are you entertaining the idea of cost sharing from employees to help offset with?
So we do, so employees are still paying in the district here, employees pay the full employee share. At the time it's every month. So we actually have 6 plans, so 6 different shares. And then of course, under PEMCA, that adjusts like every 3 years, kind of automatically. But since 2013, the employees have paid the employee share
And
here.
they're paying the minimum required, they're not paying above it.
They're not paying above and beyond the minimum requirement. But they're paying 9% or 8% or maybe in PEMCA higher on.
And then PEPRA changes depending upon
Yeah, PEPRA
how much per each year gets a return in value on investment. So
Yeah.
PEPRA employees might see a higher contribution each year and a reevaluated return on investment.
Yes, yes. And they have, it's adjusted already at least once, maybe twice since Pepper's been around.
I just want to thank you for your vision looking, 30, 40 years down the road, and that's just your level of commitment to this organization.
Yeah, no, I think it's important because you know what,
Appreciate
if you
that.
don't deal with this, the costs are there. There's no avoiding them. And it's easy to not deal with them because but somebody else is gonna have to pay the freight.
Well, I think classic is one of the most difficult because you can't force a classic person to pay more into it, even though they get the best benefit from it. There is.
Yeah, and in our case, for the most part, these folks are already gone from the district, right? Most of our employees who are part of tier 1 for either health insurance or I'll call tier 1 or classic, pre-2013, 2012, actually it was like December 2012 and earlier, very few remain. And those numbers are gonna continue to dwindle. It won't be that, we're not that far away from not having any, but we still have these liabilities. Well, maybe we're pretty far away. Maybe we're 10 years away, 15 years away. Not 30 or 40.
Point at me. We're all looking at you, Natalie.
Anyway, that's that first issue. So I appreciate the willingness to kind of tackle that. These do have, they will have budget impacts. But the idea is to pay less now than as opposed to more later.
I wish all government agencies thought that way.
Well, I mean, there's.
Especially hers, the one that holds the money.
Yeah, but I mean, there's always a thing, and I think it's more difficult to talk about as employees' contribution above what is they're required. So that's where the cost sharing comes in.
Yeah.
The difficulties in identifying employees who are willing to put into that in order to have that balanced amount. They just don't want to see their money going in anything else. They just want, if they're gonna give 2% more, they want that to go to the resource.
Yeah, in our case, again, I think there's always an option, so I don't wanna take anything off the table, there's always an option to consider any tweaks. It wouldn't make a material difference, because the unfunded liability is mostly for people who've already left the district, there's no way to get it anymore, they're not there any longer, the pool is shrunk to the point, like, again, for miscellaneous, we're talking about 2 people, and fire, it's 1. That are part of that classic group, and that's where the big UAL is, big relative, but these wouldn't be issues had we not had, post-employment retirement, or post-employment health insurance, or this, really great tier 1 plan from years ago. These wouldn't be issues that you dealt with any longer. They'd be minor issues, and they're still not. I mean, we've tackled this pretty well. I'm just saying there's a way to improve it so that 10 or 20 years from now, it's a more manageable item. Okay, on to something a little more, little less technical, I guess, or very more interesting. This is I almost said 2016. 2026 will be the district's 50th anniversary. We were created by a vote of the people in November of 1976 and came to be, I believe, in early December of that year. We did we did some things in 2016 for the 40th anniversary. 50 is a milestone, and I didn't want that, that year to, go by without recognizing it. And so my thoughts were that we could, we could work with either the admin committee or an ad hoc committee and come up with some ways for both, for the community and staff and the board to participate in some sort of a celebratory, doesn't need to be an event necessarily, but, whatever you feel like, wherever we should land, but it is next year. This is not something you could, so next, we have until next year to celebrate it. After that, it'll be too late.
The live float.
That's a good.
CSD on the float and, have the employees up there.
Put Debbie in there.
No, I've done my float in the parade.
So anyway, is there,
Mine was better.
that's the thoughts behind it.
So has there been any discussions from any other organizations to collaborate with? I mean, like with the chamber or the historical museum?
I mean,
respect
there's been
to-
zero effort other than putting it in black and white right here.
Okay, so,
I don't have a running start.
so this is the first,
This is it.
okay.
But if you think there should be other people involved, or, I don't know, that's why I threw it ad hoc committee, so that maybe some couple of.
Yeah,
people
I
might
think
wanna
that's
do-
something for the ad hoc committee to flush out, to say who should be involved.
Mentioning 11 and 26. Should we start that?
That's sort of the deadline. I kind of put that as like, okay, we're gonna be
Completion
like,
date.
whatever celebration is gonna be done, it's gonna be done by the end of next year. But it doesn't mean that you couldn't do things earlier. So for, as an example, in 2016, we did something at Concerts in the Park, and there was a few little, kind of events that were strung out. Napomo just celebrated their 60th anniversary earlier this year. I mean, so there've been, we could do some research and see what's.
I need another coat.
Alright.
I need another coat.
I still have mine too.
Does that work, the language I've got
Yeah.
there? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, item 3. If I wrote, and this probably warrants some discussion, evaluate long-term needs for district legal services and determine if current level of support is sufficient. If determined that additional support such as board meeting attendance is desired, issue an RFP for routine legal services. Just to sort of step back for a minute, about a year ago, I think that at least the admin and finance committee was considering and actually pushed to put some funding in the budget to increase the amount of regular legal assistance that we receive. It's, what we do here is unusual, in that you don't have legal counsel at your meetings. It was something that I volunteered essentially. I don't think it's necessary. I don't need it every board meeting. But I won't always be here. The folks that we lean on for legal assistance are a little bit all over the place. BKS has become a little more harder to get services from. They're just impacted. They used to be like Ryan's the former contact there, Steve Cronick, back up until about 2000, early 2000s did come to all the board meetings from Sacramento. In 2011, 12, 13, or 12 and 13 anyway, we started getting legal representation from Carmel and Akasha. At the time it was Heather Whittam. And of course, she's no longer with that firm. And David Hirsch has become kind of our point person with Carmel and Akasha. And David's a competent guy, but he's like semi-retired and doesn't really want to come here very much. He will if there's something important. Or I can find somebody else from that firm, but their municipal services division is kind of a small portion of their business. And the folks that provide that are both in that sort of semi-retirement age bracket, not to say they couldn't keep working for 10 or 20 more years, but I don't anticipate that. So I think that over the next couple of years, it might be wise to, if what we have isn't deemed sufficient, and right now we are kind of rolling the dice, because I don't know what like Carmel and Akasha's backup plan is, and that doesn't make me nervous, but it might make somebody else who's in my seat nervous, or you, if you don't know who you're getting advice from. We've got a long-standing history with BKS, like with Ryan, who there before, but they don't, but it's the work has become maybe project specific and not routine, not routine. work. So right now, David Hirsch reviews our agendas for like compliance with the Brown Act and it helps us with what I'll call simple or straightforward routine matters, just common municipal issues that might come up from time to time. We don't spend a lot of money with Carmel and Akasha. And most of what we spend with BKS is relates to the Steinbeck case, unfortunately. But they have a lot of our water history and then some of the more complicated issues that I'll label non-routine. So anyway, this is how I frame this, at least in black and white here. If you want to expand upon that, or if you don't think this is important, this can come off. Having more legal help is gonna come with a cost. We were paying like $300 an hour plus for legal help, and that's why I haven't pushed to have somebody here, because I don't know that's a good use of your resources every single meeting, and it may not be necessary every single meeting, but I think we thought it was a year ago, and circumstances changed, and that's why we haven't moved forward with it.
Yeah, so I mean, given our agenda like tonight, I don't think we need someone here. But I know that during my tenure on this board, there's been times where I think we did need legal counsel present. So I support this particular item. I would change it to word it a little differently, to not be kind of determine if. I think it is a given. We need someone who we can rely upon when the need arises to attend the meeting and consult. So I would support this.
I mean, from my perspectives, I don't know if we necessarily have to have it here in person, but just as we have remote legal routine measures.
Yeah, I mean, they can be by
And-
teleconference.
Teleconference, and I think one of the given if in the future. I could have an established legal. Assigned. Person, staffing, et cetera, so that we could have that continuance for things that have already happened in the past and things that would happen in the future. Rather than have to go through that whole entire process with someone else.
Yeah, I think the continuity would be helpful. Here's what I will tell you. What it's gonna end up happening is it's not the cost of paying someone to attend the meetings, it's the cost of getting somebody prepared for the meetings.
Yeah.
I write or we write most of resolutions. I don't reach out for legal assistance. They're gonna wanna review those things, because just in case somebody asks a question. So it's not the 2 or 3 hours at a board meeting, it's the 6 or 8 hours to prepare, or the 3 or 4 to prepare for the board meeting ahead of time. And it's gonna back up all of our deadlines. Right now, I'm fairly comfortable dealing with these things and getting them ready right before the meeting. Depending on who and how we choose, all of our deadlines might have to move up a week or two so we can get these things through legal counsel. Those kinds of things. So there's some internal, that doesn't affect you much, but it makes the movement of items to the board a little bit more.
But it could, with,
could.
if you were to leave.
It could.
And then if we had a different board, like we've had in the past, and that's where I think it comes into, we need that. We need that in our pocket. So I think if you were to leave, Jeff, I think I would necessarily, I don't know who would fill your shoes, and I think to your point, we probably would want legal counsel to review those resolutions and ordinances. So I think it'd be, to be forearmed is, I think we would be prepared, so I think we need to do that.
Well, let's, to help me kind of take a stab at revising this a little bit, because here's the thing, if I asked the question of David Hirsch today, he'd say, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
He'd say, well, I'll show up on Zoom, once every 3 or 4 or 5 months, because that's about how often I'll call on him. But if I were to say, David, I'm thinking down in the next couple of years, we're gonna want somebody like every other meeting or something like that. That's kind of, because and I'm just speaking to David Hirsch, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I don't think he views himself as working full-time. He's
He looks like he's on his path to retirement too. So I think
he's
then, I don't know.
He's only working because he can do it remotely and just very periodically.
And it's a slam dunk. He's looking at the agenda. Yep, the agenda looks good.
Yeah.
So,
It's easy.
yeah, it's easy.
None of all the CSD meetings, they all have
Legal,
legal
Absolutely.
counsel,
'Cause
they
you-
all have a present or on the remote.
Yeah.
So I think it probably, that kind, because of that, I think we should look into, I know there's additional costs to it. But one, to prepare for the meetings, one other thing that we may wanna consider is that maybe to cut down on the costs is a lot of these other special districts only meet once a month. And that, so.
You gotta wait till I'm gone before you go to once a month?
But I think you're correct, there's costs, there's associations to it, we may not need to have legal counsel at every meeting, depending upon
Yes, so-
whatever happens in the future, but knowing that we have legal counsel available in case we do, is in a better position.
Yeah, and then.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I don't think we, at this point, we need somebody here.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gone through those where we had somebody here every time. and-
Yeah,
But I do think that we need to have a law firm that we know that is good and that we can call and say, hey, a month from now, we're gonna want somebody here or whatever,
yeah, so.
which I don't think from what I'm hearing, we have.
No, that's my
As
other
long
thing.
as we don't let Jeff leave, we don't need one.
So yeah, I don't think what our current situation is the right answer. So, because we have all these lawyers that are all over the place, and I remember the difficulty that we had to go through is like, okay, which one, who are we gonna talk to, which lawyer, are they available, they're not available, so I think, the idea of going out to RFP, to have a local attorney that could be available, come to our meetings or with a Zoom and things like that, I think it would be beneficial, because they're also, if it's local, they're also more familiar with everyone else around, and they're more familiar with the policy, what's going on with all the special districts and things
I
like
don't know
that,
that
so.
local means anything. I think it's a matter of, I think being familiar with special districts.
Yeah.
I think is gonna be key. I would reword this to say evaluate long-term needs for district legal services. Determine the level of support, required, and issue an RFP for routine services. Cause I think it sounds like we're all in agreement that we wanna do this. So it's really, what's the level of service and support that we're
Yeah, okay,
anticipating?
and are you good then, do you think the admin and finance committee could work with staff
Yeah.
to do that?
Yeah. Yeah, cause I think we'll have to flesh out what
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I'm
level
still,
is.
I'm thinking like, okay, it's important to include in the RFP, are we looking for routine attendance or periodic attendance or about once a month attendance or, those
I'd
areas?
say word it somewhat where it could be any of those.
Yeah.
Well, it
I don't wanna get
depends.
us put in a box where we have to have, if you put an agreement and it says we're gonna have somebody here every month. I mean,
I think the periodic is.
Periodic,
Basically, it's
yeah.
things like, it's periodic unless otherwise noted, like, let's say there's an active legal case that we have to address at each meeting. Then it's gonna be more than periodic at that period of time.
But
I think-
also a lot depends on the general manager too, I mean, general manager we have here, yeah, I mean.
We'll have to wait and
Some
see
of
who
the
we got.
other- Well, okay.
No,
Like, stay, we're gonna go once a month.
Is that, some of the costs could be offset if we did go to
Yeah.
once a month. Because if you look at our agenda, there's been times where we canceled, and I've not looked at, how many times have we canceled
Yeah.
one of the meetings? And certainly if we said our meetings are now once a month, it does not preclude us
To
from
have a
being able to
special.
call a special meeting
Exactly.
if the need arises.
Exactly,
So,
yeah.
You
and
wanna
that-
list on here like item 3.5, evaluate whether you wanna maintain a twice monthly meeting
yeah,
schedule?
yeah, I think
Yes.
that's part of it also.
I didn't come up with this stuff.
I mean, I'll go for a longer meeting once a month.
But not until Jeff leaves.
So yeah, you're right, we, a lot of time places.
Determine the
call special
feasibility of
Mhm.
reducing the number of.
Yeah, that might solve a couple, I mean, you know. Yeah, anyway, maybe that's gonna actually probably be something I would do before this item 3, because it helps dictate how we use legal services.
Mhm.
Yeah, that would, I think, save a lot of money for the district, so.
What would,
Going
If
to
we
one
come-
month,
Yeah,
once
doing
a
once
month.
a month.
bet it doesn't,
It doesn't?
I bet it wouldn't.
I guess we have, well.
Well, we wouldn't, we'd only be paying us one time.
Well, all that money, you
That's
could
big
buy
money.
the
That's
popcorn and
big
the food
money.
and the ticket,
That's big money.
you know.
You might get more lemon bars, okay,
And also maybe a little bit easier to find an attorney that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus once versus twice, I don't know, legal, yeah. But anyways, all those could be
okay,
discussed.
and you're good with the admin finance committee also kind of taking that lead on that?
Yes.
Okay, super. All right, item number 4. This really came from we had similar items in the existing strategic financial plan, I'm sorry, strategic plan, not strategic financial plan. And I try to organize this based a little bit on some feedback, although there was no decisions made when you reviewed that in December. So let me just try to frame this in a, or, you know, sort of frame this discussion. So I listed this, the overall goal is recruit and retain a workforce necessary to provide the services for the community. And I think that's kind of a given, but I try to put these items under that category, and you're welcome to wordsmith or make this more exciting. So back in 2019, we funded, after a couple years of delay, what we labeled a total compensation study. And it was presented to the board originally in 2020, August of 2020. And then that, over the course of those ensuing months, the board adopted it, ended up adopting in December of that year, 2020, initially a compensation philosophy, a statement that reflected the board's position at the time about how they were viewed compensation and how they were going to implement the recommendations of the study. So that's why I listed for item A, review the compensation philosophy, consider updating it if warranted. That's not, I've shown that to the board several times, but it hasn't been materially discussed since 2019, since 2020, about 5 years. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. 2, or item B then would, following that would budget and conduct an update to the total comp study. I think I heard last time that, you know, look, maybe this should be done every 5 years or something along those lines. It doesn't, you don't have to use the language that I've listed here, but it has been 5 years and it's pretty out of date. We relied on it, and you made adjustments based on it, but it's now 5 years old.
So I've recently done mine for my organization, and I used our 2021. So we essentially use the exact same data, we just pulled new data. So in the original compensation study from 2020 was the valid data and cities and things of that nature.
Yeah, so
The
the-
entire process again?
No, I don't think so. I don't think the district needs to, so back in 2020, there was decision points about determining what the comparator agencies were and et cetera. I don't think it's necessary to revisit all of that again. We could just update the data. But there's been enough changes, so we've added new positions. And the real tricky part in here is determining what classification in another agency is a true match for what we might have.
Like jobs.
So
Job
that's,
descriptions, those have been updated
Yeah.
for review. I noticed, you know, from anywhere from Santa Cruz and Monterey, they've updated a lot of the job titles and descriptions. I know that wastewater, for instance, their pay is significantly off in the state of California, but that's because of regulations and requirements for certifications. They're a far more technical field than they used to be, and so those pays have increased significantly. So I mean, it would be interesting but I don't know if it's necessary to do a full from scratch comp study per se, if one was done 5 years ago.
I think it's looking at what our positions are and how our positions have changed. Did we add new positions?
we've added new
We
positions.
changed or altered any of the existing
We've
positions?
changed and altered.
So we
many.
do need to look at that, and then there has to be then crossing over to other agencies, you know, which we know those agencies will be looking at, but it's you know, finding the like job at the other end.
Yes, of course.
Well, and not all of them are gonna have.
Yeah, so but there's something similar, so in terms of skills required for those positions. But it, you know, my experience has been is that in working in the corporate world, it was something that was done every 5 years.
Less.
So I think it's due, I think, it's something that should be looked at.
Yeah, and I think if what you're suggesting, if what you're asking is, do we have to hire someone to do this? I mean, I think we have a couple of options. I could go back to RGS who did the original study and say, we don't want a whole new one. We want what we have updated based on, here's what's changed on our end, and this might not be a very high cost item. We could tackle some of that internally, or maybe a lot of it internally, but the tricky part will be, you know, trying to pair up, matches. Now, we know it matched back in 2020, but there have been some changes. We've made changes to our benefits program, for example, and health insurance program a little bit over the years, and we've done other things that are gonna make all the numbers have to be repopulated, even if there aren't those items. So I label this as an update to the compensation study, but I mean, if we wanna be, you know.
I think we need to conduct it, and I'm more inclined to say I would rather have the consultant do it, because this is really gonna gauge, you know, whether or not, and the reason why you do this is to make sure that you're competitive in the marketplace, so you can hire and retain employees. And we've had issues with that in the past, so I would rather see it done by a consultant who's familiar with this process.
I would agree. I would say that RKS has done it in the past to update it and then provide the new positions and some of the benefit updates. And it should be a pretty quick turnaround time.
Yeah, I don't think this is a huge, what happened was in 2019 when we started, we hit COVID and that just made it just,
Yeah.
you know, for a lot of the places, just like, they went dark. The organizations went like dark for months.
A year or so before we got.
Yeah.
Took
got
forever.
back.
And I don't think that'll be that much of an issue.
I think it also would be nice to have a third party look at it, an unbiased type of thing.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. Well, and I'm concerned about staff having time to really do this and how
Yeah,
quickly it
that's
would be
what
turned around. So I think that it would
Well,
be, we would be well served by.
There's
having
some
a
like-to-like
consultant.
positions that are pretty easy on the open salary schedules, where it's just updating their monthly.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's other positions where it's like, we really do need to investigate. That's why I brought up wastewater, like wastewater's requirements now are much higher than they used to
Yep.
be. Water treatment's the
And they're
same
gonna
way.
continue to be.
And they are, and that increases what the expectation is for staff members.
Yep.
Especially when they require specialized certifications, things of that
Yep.
nature.
Okay, so does the label for item B then match what you're expecting? Budget for and conduct and update to the
Yes,
total comp set?
yes.
Okay, and then item C, I just listed, consider some cost neutral or low cost changes to policies to enhance recruitment retention efforts. And I say that because we do some of this, but not in a very sort of broad way. In other words, we have some employees who work an alternate work schedule, but in general, we don't allow like our office staff to do so because it takes, it's not so much about the workload as it is the service to the public. It's really having enough people here to open the door. And, you don't have to consider these items right now. I really figured that this would be something that would come down the road, but, for example, I know we have employees here who would like to work a 410 or a 980 that we haven't opened that up to, largely because I've said, if I let you take those days off, I no longer can ensure that I can be open on a Friday. So we would have to, I think in order to make that possible, the board would have to consider having like a reduced public service hours. When I say that public, I mean open to the public. It doesn't mean we wouldn't be able to still serve the public while we're here, but for employee safety, we are a regulatory agency. People come in here angry about getting their water shut off. I don't want to put a person where there's just one individual in the office dealing with those folks. So that's kind of why we have the policies the way we do. That's the sort of background behind that item C.
So out of curiosity, is there a alternate work schedule policy and a telework policy in place?
I wouldn't describe it in the way you just did.
Okay.
Matter of fact, telework would be only on a on a case by case as needed, like if you're sick
COVID.
basis. Or we did during COVID, we do not allow that at all for any positions on an ongoing basis. And again, that's a new expectation that didn't exist for our type of work pre-COVID. It exists now.
Yeah, but it's going back the other way.
Well, it's.
Not
necessarily, not
Some
necessarily.
are, some aren't. So the other ones we have seen alternatives too is on the 410s where it's Monday through Thursday, except it's extended hours. So instead of closing at 5, they close at 6.
I
So
think-
Fridays are closed, but you have extended hours for the rest of the business day. So there are.
Trade-offs, yeah.
There are trade-offs.
It's a matter of when we have this kind of tiny little staff,
Yeah.
and
if somebody calls in sick-
some people may wanna work those same schedules we have now. And so if only one person is working at 410, again, back to I can't be open if we only have one individual. We can answer the phone, it's not that, it's really about safety.
Yes.
I think it's
So-
worth looking at to say, you know, because I think what you're discussing is just one option.
Exactly.
And I think
It's just an
there's, you know,
example.
what other things can be done to really kind of, as perks, is really what it is. So,
You could, yeah.
And I don't think 980 or the 410, probably the 980.
980.
And if you would, just throwing this out, but if you can't all have that same day. Some people will have their Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That might work.
And we've
well, I don't think we should solve it because there's
No,
other
we
things
can't.
that have to, the
Sure.
devil's in the detail.
Yeah.
If you've got somebody who's sick, it might throw the whole schedule out the window. So, cause it's such a tiny staff, so I think it's worth exploring one of those things that can be provided as a perk to the employees to retain as far as
Definitely, I agree.
retention. So I think these are just some
There's
ideas.
just things I wanted
Yeah.
to, in the future, explore, and I think they kind of tail into,
But we
maybe.
wanna, but on there, was it reduce hours open to public, so that would be one of the options as well.
Yeah, that's, I think that's really what's necessary, in order for us to offer like a 980 or a 410 amongst at least our office staff. I'd have to be able to say, look, if people take this, we're gonna have to close on a certain day or a certain half a day or whatever. In order to ensure that we're able to provide services every other day.
And which is,
Yeah.
which
And
will.
there are people who are on 980s that they just take every Friday half days.
Yeah,
So I mean, it's
oh, I see.
instead of every
Yeah.
other Friday off, like, which is what I have, some individuals have said they're only doing a half day every
So
Friday.
2 4 hours.
But it's different if you've got somebody who's greeting the public
Right,
versus somebody who's
Yeah,
just.
behind the scenes work is different.
Behind the
So I
work,
think
yeah.
ultimately.
So
we
it's
have to
different, so
consider
there's a number of
office
things that have
hours.
to
So
be
it's-
taken
it's-
into consideration,
It's
so.
more about a feasibility study on what are the benefits that even we're capable of providing a low cost. So it's not these, where it says like alternate work schedules or reduced hours, those are potentials. But what is feasible for us to
Exactly.
maintain the still services that we have?
Yeah.
For the public, and what is the public's expectation?
Well, some of it will be looking at the schedule. When did the public come into? the
You know,
office?
and a lot has
Yeah,
changed,
what are
a
your
lot has
peak
changed
times?
here pre to post COVID, so. Pre-COVID, we were open 8 to 5, we staggered lunches, we never closed, essentially. During COVID, we started closing for lunch just to make the scheduling a lot easier. Everyone takes their lunch hour more or less noon to 1. We're open the rest of the time. Nobody's really complained. I bet you our counter traffic is half of what it was in 2019. We used to have people who came by to make the payment as that's just how they spent their day. They went from us to PG&E, to the phone company, to the gas company, and that's how they spent their day. And those folks don't do that anymore. The COVID changed that and they didn't resume that habit. So the number of walk-in customers is really a lot different than it was pre-COVID. And that never really came back.
And if you have the right signage up and everything like that.
Yeah, I think you just need to look at your hours and people coming in, the traffic.
And there were some cities that have moved over to like, let's say every Fridays.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that would work for us.
That would be good.
I have a question in relation to sort of just this topic in general. Do we have information related to staff retention? How long are our employees staying? Where are they going after they leave?
Not statistically, yeah, not necessarily statistically done, but that's something we could put together. And we know, we could go backwards and look at and stuff. One of the challenges we have when we're so small is that statistics don't have a lot of validity, because you could have like a huge spike in one year because 3 people leave.
Right.
You know, because when you're only talking about the size of the organization that we have, it's harder to measure those.
And some of those retirement.
So, but yeah, we could probably put together stuff, that would be helpful.
Because it would be interesting to know if someone accepted a position elsewhere, maybe the pay was the same, but there was some other perk that was more attractive.
Sure. I'd say our biggest challenge right now, I think our retention rate's probably you'd view it as acceptable. It's our recruitment of qualified candidates that's really difficult. Like, a lot of times we have like a pool of 1 or 2 of qualified applicants. And this has become harder since COVID. But public employment is less attractive to the workforce than it was pre-COVID. So it's part of it's our industry is kind of struggling with this as well. And then item D is really more of succession planning when possible, provide training opportunities for staff to prepare for promotion as a part of succession planning efforts. I think that's more of an ongoing, need for the district.
You have on here 6/28.
Yeah, that's the end of the planning period. I just put like, as they're possible, make that happen throughout the next 3 years. It's not possible at
It's a
all.
completion date.
Be like a policy or.
One thing I wanted to bring up, and I'm not sure if it fits into this, category, but. So I was, wanted to ask you or discuss with the board the position of HR. So I know, human resources, so I know over the last several years, I mean, things have changed quite a bit and there's a lot of demand on, legalities and a lot of details that we have to know. And so currently, right now, are you our HR then?
You're looking at it, it's kind of a joint effort.
So
Here.
you,
Us 3 and payroll 2. We actually spread out amongst a few other people for like benefits administration and things
so
like
you're
that.
involved with that. So you guys do, so. I mean, how does that work
Like-
out?
Yeah, it
In
depends.
terms of what?
So
we-
what,
Well, I mean, it's just
Disciplinary
like,
action?
all those, and that, and also just knowing all the different regulations, obviously, in terms of making sure you go to classes, keeping up, because it's constantly changing. So are there any challenges?
Yeah,
I mean,
Can we take classes the first of
Yeah.
the year?
A lot of stuff that comes through webinars and workshops and things that are
And
HR related.
legal
or-
updates.
Yeah, legal updates, Natalie and I try and make sure that
Okay.
we're on all of those. Track of stuff, if there's any policy updates that we need to know about.
so, it's really one of those things that's sort of hidden. There might be, a month might go by and there's almost like 0 HR related items. And then you could get like a lot of things all at once. And so we have to have the bandwidth to absorb that. That's because we don't have somebody devoted to it 100%, that's a little trickier. I don't know that we need a dedicated HR person. I don't think there's enough work to fill a full person's plate. But we need to have resources. So we have an arrangement with Lieber Cassidy Whitmore. It's a law firm that specializes in public sector HR. And so we have access to them all the time. And they're really kind
We
of
have
top notch.
classes,
And
I
they
think we
have
class
training.
Thursday with them, so.
We use Liberty Cassidy Whitmore as well. We have a dedicated HR department.
Yeah, but that's different. The city is.
The city's very
much more
different. When I first started in 13, we had 6 employees. Now we have over a dozen. But there's a lot of reasons behind that, and the city has those reasons. So like, I have classes on Thursday too, with the Cassidy
you know,
Whitmore,
Bryce.
so down to Escadero. I mean, and so there's a lot of these courses that are offered for supervisors and other things from relevant staffing outside of just dedicated staffs to it, because even our dedicated staffs for the city of San Luis, they don't have the time fully to develop everything as well. So there's a lot of outside resources that are utilized for it.
so we do use that. So
Yeah,
also-
we do, and there are ways for us, I think for a little while, I used like RGS to handle some recruitment efforts. We were a period of like 8 months where we were down a staff member and we did some, so we were able to kind of expand bandwidth using some sort of consulting services to help with recruitments and whatnot. I think it's a valid question. I don't know what the right solution would be. We need a little more expertise and a little more bandwidth, but we don't need a full-time person for our agency.
So do we have a documented process for onboarding new employees?
We have lists.
We have checklists of all of the paperwork that they have to go through and things like that between.
And has that been reviewed by legal to make sure that we're covering everything we should with a new hire?
Paperwork wise, I don't think so. I mean, most of it's off of like,
Well, I mean, just a
Different what?
checklist that makes sure that you're going through all these things with the employee, with a new hire. So how do you onboard a new hire? And is it a consistent process that every department goes through? You know, filling out the right paperwork.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's all
making-
that's all
handled by
handled
payroll. Yeah, she has a whole list of forms that we're required to give.
And then as
and
things
give
get
back.
added, like we just had to do the violence prevention, that got added to the list, so as things come through that.
Well,
have to
in
be
terms of
included.
even training, because one thing, if you've got a new hire and they're not meeting the job, they need to go under corrective action, or you need to show them the door, you need to show that you did your part in getting that employee trained to be able to do the job. Cause it lends itself to the,
I mean, it's not a strength of the district.
and I'm
But-
not saying that it
right.
requires a full-time HR person, but it's to say there may be opportunities to kind of standardize that, some of the onboarding process, and recruitment, I mean, and rely, the services that we rely upon outsourcing.
I mean, it could even be part-time. Maybe
Yeah.
it sounds
Maybe,
like.
what if I took a stab at something like, because I think it belongs into this category here, because it's part of sort of this HR thing. So what if we added a box in here somewhere, like enhance HR, human resources, capabilities of the district through, and we could come up with some ways. So I don't know that, again, that it's if we had more ongoing relationships, we do on the Lieber Cassidy Whitmore side, which is really terrific. It's a widely used service. But when it comes to other things like some of the formalities of training or policy review and those kinds of things. What we end up, one of the
Risk
things,
management,
yeah.
right?
well, risk management is a little different. We're a member of the
Well,
SDRMA.
Well, in terms of HR,
Yeah, yeah.
like avoiding problems
Sure.
and, preventing
Well, and
problems
even
because.
disciplining
Yeah,
an
this, yeah, I mean,
employee,
because,
you've gotta speak to the behavior.
yes,
So it's good to have HR review it to make sure you've covered everything, because part of that has gotta be, you've gotta prepare a plan for how you're going to get that employee to meet the standards.
So that's an area that we would be weak in.
Yeah.
Part of that is because of just a lack of enough segregation of duties.
Yeah.
So some, like the way our personnel guidelines are structured, it's sort of the basis of public agency employment is you've got to have people who can serve as like an independent review officer and those kinds of things. So that means that, like in my case, I can't be involved in the nitty gritty of a
Yeah.
discipline because
Yeah.
that person may be filing a request to have that matter heard.
Yeah.
So I have to provide like big picture guidance.
Well, and even sexual harassment, if there's an allegation of sexual harassment, do we have a policy on that in terms of who they file the complaint with?
That's all in the personnel.
Yeah, we have a policy.
Okay.
but I just know if
Yes.
it's,
Well,
But
once it becomes a problem,
yeah,
then
But I
it's a
think
huge
it's
problem,
looking
so.
at, so there's an opportunity to look at, HR, there's situations come up,
Helping out with
disciplinary.
evaluations, doing
Yeah,
evaluations. of
evaluations,
staff.
well, and even evaluations, I never had HR look at evaluations, it was really more of HR saying you need to have it done. But they could care less what I put in the evaluation. But it was more of when it came time to discipline an employee, and even terminate employment, it was making sure that everything was correct. All the right steps were taken, otherwise, then you get the
So
wrong.
we have assistance through Lieber Cassidy Whitmore. But it's expensive. I mean, we're paying $400 an hour for that kind of assistance, but that's kind of one of the challenges we have. We don't have a person on staff who's gonna walk who's gonna really comb through those details. And so when we have to engage, like Lieber Castillo Whitmore on a specific matter, not a general question, a specific matter, then we're gonna get stuck with a bit billing on it.
How about like going back to, we talked about looking at finding an attorney law firm. I mean, do they combine those, tasks, attorney and?
They will for a price.
Yeah, so what I would say is, I don't think that's likely where you're gonna land. All these firms will do some HR work, but Lieber Cassie Whitmore is sort of the experts. And even our law firms will say, no, if you have a relationship with LCW, let them handle it. But I just making some notes here, because I sort of think that maybe this whole big box you're talking about would include sort of like an audit of our policies, and maybe we did an update to our employee guidelines, but that's been like 12 years ago now. So it's been a while. We've added things as new requirements have come down, but we haven't necessarily done like a comprehensive audit of them. Bless you. So it's not there's room for improvement here without a doubt, and I think you've expressed some concerns, so I'll take a stab at kind of trying to incorporate these items into item 4 here.
Okay.
Do we know if any other community service districts has dedicated HR or just?
But we all piecemeal the duties. Maybe Cambria's got, they would actually have an HR tech or something that works there. They're probably double our size. Staff-wise, staff size.
I think she does billing too, because I think she was at that.
So, everyone's gonna, again, more sharing. We're small organizations, but, yeah, most of them don't have any devoted.
Yeah, maybe just.
I mean, it might be of interest if they have a staff member that's part-time.
Yeah, exactly.
Then
Share.
to share, I don't wanna have to send them all around the county.
They may be interested.
Another HR person.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there might be more than one way to skin it.
Well, through CSDA maybe, like going through the
Yeah, I mean-
chapters, they can help with an HR, like they could.
Well, for
hire-
example, I've had to do, for city of not city of San Miguel, the San Miguel Community Service District, they needed an independent hearing officer. So they contacted me and said, would I do it? And I said, yes. So that's how we would help one another kind of off the books. Because they needed someone.
All right, okay, next one.
Okay, this next category, I just took a stab at growth and expansion. Again, this is growth of the district. And I'll just stop for a second and try to frame this again and state that, really the district hasn't changed its boundaries at all in a few decades. Largely that's because we are resource constrained. We haven't had enough, for example, water to serve even all the parcels within the district. So looking outside the district hasn't been a priority. The sphere of influence changed a couple times, and we did annex some property that we bought, but it was just for our own reasons. Otherwise, in terms of growth of the district boundaries from the perspective of facilitating development, that's not been something that's been really examined in a long time. So I listed this, so item A is actually pretty simple. The district bought a parcel out of a tax lien sale in 2017. It's the northern half of the Creekside property. So if you drive down Creekside Ranch Road and you cross the railroad tracks and you're driving to the river where our wells are, it's the stuff to the left as you're driving towards the river. That roughly 25 acres was bought in 2017. It's got we did get it added into the sphere of influence the last time LAFCO did a municipal service review. Annexing it, the benefit of annexing it is the district wouldn't pay property taxes on that property. And in the long run, that's probably important. The property tax on that site is like a pittance. Because we bought it out of a tax lien sale, and it's $100 a year, some really small number, I can't remember the exact amount. No, it's not a lot of money. But in the long run, we should annex it. It will be a hurdle. The county's gonna require, trail easements and maybe even a dedication of land that's zoned agricultural. I mean, I went through this process for the southern half, like in 2014 or 15, and when we annexed that that parcel, and it's kind of it's a hurdle to do it. It's doable, but it's some effort. In that case, the property value was quite a bit higher, and getting it off the property tax books was important. Nonetheless, I think item A is important, and we should move forward with it.
I mean, when we develop it though, would the property taxes go up or those?
I
things?
don't, and they won't with the wells, because we don't have to get building permits for those.
I see.
They may for the fire, the work for the fire, because we'll have to get building permits for that. So that'd be a bigger reason. And then item B is probably the bigger issue, and that is, really two reasons. One, we face inquiries, from developed property outside the district's boundaries to connect to the district's systems. And I'm talking wastewater and water system, and I push back on those. But I don't, but these folks get aggressive and whatnot. That's something that we'll have to kind of take into consideration. And then I think we should, in the long run, come up with a policy that says, where should Templeton grow once we have the resources to allow additional development beyond what's in our boundaries today to be served by water and wastewater, and of course, all the other things that we do, but water being the most constrained of those services. And as you imagine freeing up additional water resources with additional, water supply and, working our way through the wait list, at some point it will become exhausted and there'll be new demands, whether that's parcels within the district, and then I think primarily parcels north of the district. There's some concerns I have about allowing those folks to connect, and they're gonna use up resources, and they're not gonna bring any money to the table because they're existing development on very low tax base. And so they further strain our tax funded services like fire in particular. Whereas we've put policies in place that allows new development to essentially pay their fair share through, development impact fees. More importantly, the community service, the Melrose district or the CFD. And then of course, the property tax basis would be high because it'd be new development. So you have a fresh, property tax. But we don't have any of that in sort of developed in a policy. And then additionally, we really can't drive that entirely. That's something that's done in partnership with San Luis Obispo County Planning Department, and maybe even a general plan update or a community plan review that helps dictate where new growth should occur in Templeton. But I think if we do nothing, we're gonna continue to get inquiries to connect to our systems. And some of that's a little bit out of our control. I'm using some of the fact that we're impacted right now as ways to kind of push back, but ultimately, like the State Water Board can come in and demand systems to connect, and that's a little bit concerning, because I know that some of you are looking at this opportunity to serve new development as a way of expanding tax base to provide for our tax funded services, and the Water Board's just not going to care about that.
So even if we had a policy, if the water board can override the policy is what you would say.
Probably. So far, I've been able to.
At least we have a policy that we can point to the individuals who wanted to have the interconnect.
Well, I think we're gonna have to come up with more of a justification, I would think, than just saying that there isn't the revenue that they bring in. So I think it's really gotta be based on our capacity to accommodate
And where we envision growth going. In other words, if you have that sphere of influence is sort of an announcement to the public that this is where the district, might expand in the future.
Well, growing in one direction could limit the ability for us to grow.
In another, sure.
Yeah, well, I think it's the growth being new development is what I see growth as opposed to an existing,
Right.
you know,
Well, yeah, an expansion
user
of
that's now
boundaries
wanting to
over
come in
here.
and play, but not have to pay because of the impact fees.
Well, I think, I mean, my position right now is that, that even if we were forced to take them, they'd have to pay their way into the system. It's just, would there be other ancillary benefits to the district, like growth in property taxes or CFD funds when that occurred, and likely not. And if they use up the same resources that we would be allocating to that future growth, then there's
It's gotta be a
potentially
win for
loss.
us as well.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
can't just
So,
be a win for.
right now, it hasn't been that hard. We don't have water available. They're not on the wait list, et cetera, right? But in time, those won't be answers that we'll be able to provide, or there won't be a, I don't wanna call it an excuse, that's really not right, but, you know, a reason. But the board hasn't really tackled this in any big way, and I think it probably is worth spending some time on it, and doing some research. As a matter of fact, I just saw another question show up through an email about annexation policies and those kinds of things. So, and we've had interest, like, so from TAG and about like having, you know, more local say in how and where Templeton grows. And there hasn't been an effort by the county. One, we've been resource limited, and so that probably hasn't been a reason for the county to say, okay, Templeton, you're gonna have additional resources to provide growth maybe beyond your existing boundaries. And actually, I don't even know if that's the case, because we haven't analyzed this in a very thorough way, right? In terms of maybe we won't have enough water to serve beyond our boundaries. I don't know that.
I think it's worthwhile in kind of fleshing out to say, you know, what is our position on this?
I mean, I like seeing this on here because I'm thinking 30, 40 years down the road. And water has always been a limiting resource that we have, but we are putting, we have a project now, we're gonna spend money and time and effort where it's gonna bring many water units to our town. So I would love to be able to say, okay, if we have expand our sphere of influence, okay, we and then, so we look at the sphere of influence and say, okay, this is where we could put our infrastructure, our water lines, our sewer lines could go there and have this sphere of influence where we could have the growth and bring in the revenues, the CFD. And yes, there's gonna be some pushback from some area, in terms of it, but there's always a little bit of, you have to have a little bit of give, but for us, long-term, to see our parks and recreation program, our fire department to succeed, we have to raise our revenues. And expanding our sphere of influence, that'd be the only way. And bring in, to bring in that, the main thing is to hopefully bring in that CFD fund, raise that up. Get that, can we could raise our CFD funds to $2 million.
Well, I think if the requests are already being made, I
Yeah.
think we need a policy.
Yeah.
To really kind of say what our position is as a district. To say, to your point, what is our sphere of influence?
Yeah.
But, we've talked about incorporating. Well, if we incorporate, that one of the things that come up is, are we going to stick with the TCSD boundaries, or do we go with the school boundaries?
Yeah.
Templeton, so I think it's
Yeah,
worthwhile, and we have to determine, well, and I'm also a little concerned if the state water board comes in and says, you have to provide this. I think we have to be able to have a position already kind of flushed out in terms of what does that mean to us?
Yeah.
What's the
But
impact?
yeah,
to
I mean,
us?
I think you mentioned, I think it's a mobile park, but this is, I think, it's such a big,
Yeah.
important issue that we cannot say because we're gonna have a mobile park that's gonna come, try to take some water to, avoid this, to prevent this. We do need to look at it, we need to look at big picture, because ultimately, I think this is where we need to go. And then you mentioned community plan, I think that should be fed into this somehow. We haven't had a community plan in decades, so we do need to work with the county to come up with a community plan, so that way, we could have a say in terms of how we wanna see this community develop, so we don't have like 3 gas stations in one.
Well, I think there already is a community plan.
No, well, it's
TAG,
decades old.
TAG has got it.
No, it's decades old though, it's like,
But is that
20, 30
actually,
years
who
old.
owns that community?
It's a
plan?
county document, the county would.
County, yeah.
so.
So how much is the state? Because the state says you're gonna have this many people, and
Yeah.
that chant's gonna change immediately.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, the state's gonna have a lot of say too, so we kind of, so where do we wanna, I think we should have a community input, because when you develop a community plan, you have community input, the residents coming, you have workshops, and determine how you want, how you want the town to grow, otherwise the county is just gonna put projects,
Well,
right?
the county's already.
They're gonna do that anyway.
County's
Well,
already.
not if we have a community plan, we could at least take
No.
it to them.
No.
Because they override the community plan today.
They overrun. It's just like,
So a lot of it,
tag's useless.
Well,
no,
that, yeah.
TAG's not useless. TAG just doesn't know how to organize.
I think the goal within the community plan policy is to have something in place that we can reference. Whether or not the water board comes and overrides it, or whether the county overrides it or whatnot, we have a living document that we can point our community members to. Suggest this is the policies that we have in place.
I
This
think-
is the way in which that we're running
I
this
agree with that.
community. You know, and if we need to make adjustments and changes to that in the long term, too, that's understandable, you know, because that's gonna very much change if we no longer have a wait list for water.
Yeah.
You know, we're gonna see very big dramatic changes to how development is being.
I think I could, kind of take what you discussed and kind of fold that in with a sort of a partnership requesting of the county to fund a community plan that we would participate in, and that would help determine the resources that are likely gonna be available in
We need to evaluate what that community plan is for, how does it, is it aligned with our vision for the district? And to make recommended changes to that community.
So here's.
But we don't
here's-
own that.
Yeah, here's the challenge is we don't have land use authority, so
Yeah.
we have, we're a utility provider and a service provider, not a, we don't get the vision.
We don't own it.
Right, it's the county
The
gets,
county that's
has that
owns.
say.
And
So,
even if
but,
that
but,
community
but
plan, they
we can,
override.
we're still right now, we're the bottleneck, right? The water supply is the bottleneck. And so I think the reason I listed this here is I think over the next few years, you see that bottleneck going away or being reduced. And so we don't wanna wait until it's, the floodgates are open and there's no time to prepare something. So I think that we can fold in this sort of partnership community plan component into this.
Yeah.
We may still end up with something that's standalone about how we're, how we wanna pursue either sphere of influence changes or annexation changes, or encourage annexations or whatever.
Yeah, that would be nice if we
Yeah.
could try it. I mean, is there any way we could encourage annexations?
Well, right now, so that someone have to have the water, they're,
Water,
right now,
yeah.
water.
But-
But
well,
we've
I'm
had
talking
projects that
about-
have had water and couldn't get annexed to the district.
Because, what?
They were denied under LAFCO. Typically because it's zone agriculture.
That should change in a few weeks.
Yeah, typically it's because the preservation of agricultural.
No, it's, I mean, I'm looking at Napoma use, what is the big project?
Oh, Dana Reserve.
Yeah, Dana Reserve, I mean, the project that they have, I mean, how many homes is that, like 700 or even maybe bigger? And that's just gonna bring substantial amount of revenue
Yeah.
to them, so, and to me, I mean, I'm looking at, back in early 2000s when we had the vineyards development go in. And putting those homes, I mean, bringing all the families to Templeton, which brought a whole bunch of students, and all those families were donating money, time, effort. I mean, I think it made Templeton so much better,
Well,
so.
I think even the county is gonna support that, because the county needs the growth, because the state is requiring that they provide housing.
Yeah.
So I think it's a win-win. I think what we need to make sure is that we're consistent with this community plan.
Yeah.
Because that's not that's the county that owns that. But I think we need to make sure that, we're not gonna implement anything that's going to be counter to that.
Okay,
Well, I
I'll
think-
take a stab at drafting this, and I may break this up into like 2 or 3 pieces, because we're not gonna have all this done by 2028, like a new
No.
plan.
Yeah.
But we can do some of our own
Yeah.
resource evaluation, we can try to form partnerships, we can evaluate those steps.
Yeah.
Those kinds of.
Yeah, specifically, looking at the sphere of influence and seeing the areas where we could expand.
Yeah, that actually probably is not super difficult, as long as we do it as part of like an MSR, a municipal service reviews. LAFCO automatically does a sphere of influence review. I was able to get that little piece out, it was without any trouble, so, it may be not as tricky.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So B probably I'm gonna break it up a little bit further.
Yeah.
Okay, going on to a very different topic. Item 6, this is something that actually, this was a goal from many years ago. we had a goal of having a digitally searchable, electronically searchable database of our ordinances and resolutions. Well, the ordinances, that became an adoption of a municipal code, and we worked with Unicode, which now is owned by Civic Plus, but a Unicode, and we have a code, a district code online. All of our ordinances get folded into that code through a codification process, and that works well. The resolutions, we never got that far with the resolutions, and again, keeping in mind that as far as law is concerned, ordinances is sort of the top that you get to deal with. That's just, that's a black and white, hard to change, not super hard, but just, you can't just, it takes a little effort to do so. Resolutions, we have a lot of items that are adopted by, a lot of documents, other items that are adopted by resolutions, policies that are adopted by resolutions. And they're available on our website, but they're not organized in a way that would make it very user-friendly to the public. You could search, if you knew the resolution number, you could search and find it, and if it was done in the last 12 or 13 years, it'd be on the website. But that wouldn't automatically tell you if that's still the most current adoption of a certain policy, etc. This is probably good for just being as transparent as possible. I mean, I see why we didn't proceed with it, because there's not a lot of demand to find these things, and we're usually able to find them for people. But
So how are they kept currently if they're not in a searchable repository?
sign into files.
They're in binders, and then they're in an electronic folder by year, and then I have a giant Excel sheet that has all of it.
But you have to know, yeah,
Internal.
so it's just internal, okay. So, okay,
Not publicly available. I mean, they're public documents, so they're publicly available, but somebody
no,
would
but
know
I
what they're
mean,
asking
even
for.
for an employee just looking for a resolution, it sounds like it's a hunt and peck.
Yeah, it's a little effort.
So before when I got here, it was, just every year had a folder that had the resolutions in it, and that had a Word document that had the names of them. So I took all of that and put it into one master Excel sheet, so that if you're looking for a resolution and you know some of the keywords in it, you can search for it. So it makes it a lot easier to track down stuff, at least that way.
She's able to find everything for me.
Real quick too.
And then evaluate options, again, item 7, something totally different, and I wanna make sure that I explain this, is what we've got in the district office here works pretty well. There are some items that are missing that most workplaces have, like we don't have a devoted employee break room, for example. Now, we have space, the employees usually.
Got the whole park over there.
Yes, our employees use this room or use this conference room, and like 98% of the time, it's available. But sometimes it's possible that both those rooms are unavailable and employees don't have a place to go. We have a lack of private office. You talked about HR work, this is a problem. There's not a confidential place in this whole office to have a meeting. None of the walls are soundproof at all. If I have to make a confidential phone call, I walk to the park or something like that, or a meeting, because there's no way to talk to somebody to truly have confidential conversation. And there's a limit, so there's not like a room you can go to have a private meeting, because the walls, everything just it's like a bedroom in your house. There's no soundproof. And then there's just not.
Family's always.
There's not a lot of growth space, particularly. We have desk space, like room for one more person in a kind of a cubicle, but we don't have more office space. None of these things are needed today, but I think there could be an evaluation done about what is the long-term vision for this? We own this property, we own this building, this is where we should stay. Where should we grow? So at least when the opportunity comes, it's done in a logical manner and not just a, tough shed out back or whatever. So those are some needs. My item 7 wasn't actually complete these necessarily, but to have a plan for the building.
Are you also thinking maybe having, for example, like Justin be closer to
Yes, well, like where would I have, that's the
Yes,
problem right now.
Yeah,
is
that's
like,
what you're looking for.
or like,
expansion, or even
or
also-
right now, so for example, Carrie conducts our pre-employment background checks. So that necessitates like phone calls and stuff. She's doing those from an open office. There's no way to make those, she doesn't have a place, she can close her door, but it's open.
I turned my heater on to make it.
It's not, it's
Drown out
fine,
loud.
it works, but it's not ideal. It's not,
Oriana,
it works.
if we have employees that come in and wanna talk to Nancy about something, she'll come in.
She has to come in here, yeah. We have this little conference room back here where you can have at least not a disturbed meeting, but it's,
So what are the options you're thinking?
Can we grow up?
well, there's room behind this building. I mean, and right now, it hasn't been a lot practical because this is used as sort of a driveway for the
Yeah.
fires. Once that fire station expansion goes in, they're gonna put a generator back here and in their vehicular access needs they're not gonna be able to do that anymore. So this space back here is available. We really, at one point I looked at, like the office that Natalie's in, the office that I'm in, they have all these built-in bookshelves and that one even has like a plan check table that no one really uses. There might even be a way of dividing those up so we can create another office space there. I haven't put a ton of thought into it, but I do think it's something that in the long run should be.
You still have a lot of space at the rec office. I mean, you got a lot of offices over there
Yeah,
aren't used.
yeah,
and
right.
junk and-
Yes, we have a lot of space, right, we do.
Yeah.
And that's something you could do, is just,
At one
you can
point,
move over there.
at one point, engineering was over
Yeah,
there.
and
Yeah, we just moved our district engineer back a couple of years ago, 3 years ago.
so. And there's value in having people work where they see each other instead of like, yeah.
I
separate.
think this is worthwhile, especially when we no longer have the water wait list.
Mhm.
And all this development is occurring because there will probably be growth in staff.
Yeah, I mean, I think 20 years from now, then. it'll be a different-
No, but I think we need to look at what does it look like? Because I think it's looking at the needs of the district operationally, and what do you need in terms of office space? So it's.
Yeah, it's not a crisis of any sorts, it's just not ideal, and I think in the long run, we can make some improvements.
Is the rec department, is that a bigger building then?
Yes, I would say it's a bigger building, especially if you don't count this boardroom space. It's a pretty big, good sized building. It's
Because of the guy in the back, you can't tell as you go up.
yeah.
So I mean,
If you
that's-
walk through it, you can see,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as an option, I mean, I would say, yeah, I mean, expand your options, evaluate, all the facilities that what would be best, and maybe not just this location. but the other. Because I think, but if you do that though, you gotta, your whole, it changes like how you
The whole
conduct
process
business.
changes.
Well, yeah, and how you conduct business.
Yeah, and that space is not fully utilized, but. There was a reason why we moved the district engineer here, even though it constrained our space further. Was to get people to work together
Exactly,
and not
no,
be
you have
isolated.
to have people there. That's why I was.
Serve the
asking.
customer, is like, yeah, before. Like, customers came here to do business with the district engineer, but shouldn't work here, so it was, then we had to either set an appointment or something, we get we get walk-in business for that service. So, okay, that's what we had drafted for you, were there other items that, beyond, I know we added this HR component. And I've made some other notes of things that you wanted added. Are there other items that fall into this sort of everything else bucket, that you think need to be listed in this, strategic plan?
No, I think you did a nice job. Thank you.
Very good.
Nice.
With the help of your two cohorts over there.
That was all.
Nobody spoke up, said, please take that off. Okay, so we've got, on this, as it relates though, there was some interest in, we wanted to kind of talk about where do we go next? How do we finish this up. When we started this process, when we outlined this process back in January, the thought was that an ad hoc committee could kind of work with staff to kind of finalize some of this language. You made changes along the way and these haven't really come back to you yet. And kind of work to make sure that we've captured what the spirit of that was. That's one option. There was a vision statement that was envisioned being complete. And then just sort of like another sort of review of the text, make sure that we've captured the spirit of these items.
Okay. So with the vision statement, I just wanna see, get consensus. So the only time we had the vision statement was this last strategic plan, right? The previous ones did not have a vision statement?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So the only time we've had it was this last time, so I just wanna get a consensus if we wanna do a vision statement or not. I mean,
I think it would be worthwhile to have a vision statement
Okay.
as well.
You guys, anybody else, any?
I'm impartial.
And I will second impartiality.
I'm impartial.
Oh, you guys.
Well, does that mean only one of you wants a vision statement?
Useless.
Well, do we wanna do it or do we not?
Can
I mean,
you-
I don't know, I
I
never
don't
looked
know,
at.
can you, is it readily available to pull up the previous one?
It's basically going to be what we envision Templeton look like after after these things are accomplished, right?
That's how the last one was drafted. It was like a-
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, after we wrote it up, I never looked at it till we looked at it again, so. It's just,
That's how important it was.
that's how important it was. Yeah, they have it.
Most strategic plans have a mission and a vision statement.
So, I
It's
mean,
pretty
it's-
standard.
So,
I mean, that's why, I mean, I put it on the agenda, so that way we could discuss it, so if we need to discuss it, yeah, we're okay.
It's that blue box. Yep, right there.
You wanna read it or? Okay. Can you guys read it?
You need it bigger? It's fine for me.
It's really a synopsis of the strategic plan.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, looking at this, it doesn't look like even if we were to include a new vision statement, a ton has to change from this last one.
Well, some of it, like the 24/7 for fire department, the
Yeah, but-
100% retrieval, those stuff would be.
The specifics here, but then like all areas of operations meet or exceed. It's pretty like.
Yeah, the verbiage would have to be changed. It would have to be edited a little.
Well, some of it, but some of
Yeah.
it is just will.
Yeah,
I mean, if you guys wanna work. But I probably should just do it at the ad hoc committee, I think that. we
Yeah.
could handle that. Okay, alright, and then so with the, if, we'll do the ad hoc committee, so we'll do the vision statement. Okay. And then another thing that we wanted to do with the strategic plan, add, how we got here, how we did the strategic plan.
to
so that way-
document the process.
Yeah, document the process. And then maybe, and that we could write down how often we wanna review it. I'm thinking annually, review the strategic plan.
And then to
Um,
be drafted every 3 years.
And then, yeah. Yeah, well, that's another thing, is like, when do we wanna start the process?
Yeah, Cambria has their process all well documented. Who's involved, how's it done, what's the template that's used, it's pretty comprehensive. And I think that's what you're looking for, is something similar that says, really is how often do we do this? What's our approach? And I think it's worthwhile in documenting it, because I think this has been a good process. Given the last two strategic plans that we've been involved in, we've had consultants who come wanting to do a strategic plan that fits within a large organization. And their process never fit within the district because we're too small. And I think it would be too labor intensive for what they were requiring. So this is, I think, something that's worthwhile in documenting what we went through and how we got here.
Yeah, we could do that, and I think staff and the ad hoc committee could do that, okay. And then, okay, so ad hoc committee is gonna look at that, look at the review, how often we wanna review it, do the vision statement. And then, one thing though is the ad hoc committee is not gonna be able to change any of the items, just clean up the verbiage, right?
Yeah, I wasn't envisioning the ad hoc committee,
Yeah.
changing direction or something like this, but just
Okay.
just
Just
ensuring that.
reviewing the changes we discussed got incorporated.
Yeah,
Okay,
call like finalize the language more or less.
okay.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead, then I'll go ahead and say it, we should create the ad hoc committee, and I know last time you had interest, you wanted to do it,
I'll participate.
anybody else interested?
I forget, how many, like, a committee is comprised of how many
Two
members?
No more than 2 board members.
I mean, of you, do you wanna be involved? No. I'll do it.
Yeah. We with Cambria, we've got a good template
Yeah.
to start with.
Yeah,
So I think it's really kind of, there's some changes that I think we need to make, but I think that's a good starting point. So.
So you wanna do it?
Yeah.
Alright.
So you need to, take action to formally.
Okay, so so we'll create an ad hoc committee for our strategic plan workshop, to review the vision statement, to document the process, and to review how often we wanna, review the strategic plan, and Director Logan and will be on.
Good at those kind of things.
Got it,
Got it.
okay,
And
We'll-
what's our due date for having this completed?
Next week.
So, yeah, I think it depends on your and our availability, which is unfortunately a little bit limited. Our next board meeting is May 6th. So we would have until about April 30th if you want to hit the May 6th meeting. Otherwise, you have about a month, because we'd have until May 20th, that's the following one.
So my recommendation is that we just, right now, is finalize the language on the strategic plan. And then the others we do later. Because that's more important, that we get the strategic plan.
no, we could just do it all and then just bring it back.
No, but I'm saying is if we just look at the strategic plan that we just completed
Mhm.
and have that come back to the board. And then meanwhile, we can continue to work on documenting the whole process and the vision.
So I think
The
the
vision
vision
statement.
statements should be a part of that.
Yes, vision
plan.
statement would have to be done.
The language would need to be finalized, and you probably should have a idea of when you're gonna review this twice a year or once a year going forward, because that should be stated in the
Yeah.
plan.
I think we could just do it all, right?
you're concerned about the time limitation?
Well, I'm just trying to look at how we, the timing of getting all this completed, because then we have the frequency of review of the strategic plan, but then we have the documenting the process.
And so you said, May 6th is our next meeting?
May 6th is the next.
It doesn't have to be,
Yeah, I mean, we can have until May 20th.
yeah.
That would give the committee about a month. If we shot for May 20th, you'd have until about May 15th to do these items.
Yeah, and then it'll come back and then we'll be able to approve it then?
Yes.
Okay, then we'll just approve it May 15 and then it'll go into effect as of June 1st.
Okay.
That was our plan.
Yeah, I mean, the only staff who need to be present are,
Probably
In this
Carrie and
room?
I, she's got we have a running, I've done a decent job up until for Parks and Rec and for water and wastewater of trying to incorporate all those changes. I'll have I'll do tonight's, and then I have to do a little bit more work on fire. But, you know, those things provided you're not gonna wanna meet tomorrow morning, we'll have ready. Even if you wanna meet tomorrow morning, I'll have work for you, I'll have items for you.
You'll have to work for us.
Either at the board meeting, when it's presented, or beforehand, will, like, the respective staff be able to see it too, to make sure that they're comfortable?
So
The department
interesting
heads.
way you phrase that question, you made changes that the staff did not recommend, so that's, don't, when you ask for comfort, I mean, they'll be able to absolutely review it.
Okay.
Absolutely, they'll be able to review it, it'll be a public document, as a matter of fact, I had intended on taking, the draft, that's not finalized, to, we're doing like an all-hands meeting end of next week. And I was gonna share just with all of our staff members, just sort of where we stood right now, even though it's not yet been buttoned up or finalized. Just so that
Yeah,
it's fresh.
Yeah, so that
Yeah,
everyone's.
it'll be obviously agendized, so they'll be
Yeah.
able to review it.
Okay.
If they have any concerns.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess if I hear something coming out of your
Yeah, I don't-
committee about like a little tweak in language, say, well, that's more than just a tweak, that's more than, that seems to change the spirit or change the
Right,
yeah.
outcome. Then I'll wanna say, okay, hold up, that doesn't seem like that was what is.
Because that's not the intent. The intent
Yeah, it
is
shouldn't
just
be
to
anything substantive.
really just,
Finesse.
wordsmith to make sure we captured the intent of what this board approved.
So we can work with you, the ad hoc committees meetings don't need to be Brown Act noticed. So you can meet on kind of short notice, but our preference would be that at least Carrie and I would be available so we can work on these things in real time. And, but we can work with you tomorrow to or you can set a meeting right now if you wish. It's your preference. You don't need to, or tonight after the board meeting or whatever.
Okay, let's do it after the board meeting.
What? You gonna take me home first?
Come on, you can walk up that hill.
Alright.
Okay,
So this, everything you're done.
meeting adjourned.